What's up, guys? Dr. Gabrielle Lyon here with my longtime mentor, Dr. Don Layman. And today we're going to talk to you about calories. I probably think that calories are the most, I don't even want to say controversial, but the most commonly talked about thing in the health and wellness space. It has to be. I can't even imagine being that popular.
Everybody at some level is interested in calories.
Yeah. So I'm just going to kick this off to you. What are calories?
Well, technically, calories are simply a measure of heat. So if you put some carbohydrates or a log into a furnace and burn it, you get X amount of heat off of it, and that's a measure of calories. The British, the Europeans use joules, which is more of a measure of work, which might actually be better. But basically, it's just, you put it in something called a bomb calorimeter and you get calories out of it. So whether it's a fat calorie or a carb calorie or a protein calorie, they just all look alike.
And where do you think the confusion comes from for people in terms of, because there is this conversation that protein calories are different than carbohydrate calories, but the nuance there is that actually a calorie is a calorie, right? But the impact that that calorie has on the body is different depending on the source.
Right. So, again, based on the unit of measure, all calories are alike, but metabolically, they're not alike. And the one that is uniquely different is protein. So when you eat 100 grams of protein, it takes about 20, let's go calories, not grams. If you eat 100 calories of protein, you're going to lose about 20 of those calories to heat as it metabolizes. I personally think it's related to the stimulation of protein synthesis. But if you ate fat or carbohydrates 100 calories, you're only going to lose about 5.
And if it's fat, you're going to lose probably even less than 5.
Yeah, they're about the same. Fats and carbohydrates are about the same. It's, maybe 4 versus 5, but it's around 5% is the metabolic loss to heat to digest and absorb and metabolize. And protein's unique, though, because its metabolism also includes protein synthesis, which is very energy expensive. A lot of people would argue that the protein effect is because the nitrogen is hard to handle. It costs.
No, that's not true.
It's not. Urea cycle is relatively metabolically efficient. So I'm pretty convinced that the effect of protein is really the protein synthesis effect. And as you and I have talked in the past, to really get that thermic effect, you have to eat your meals correctly. So if you just sprinkle in protein all day long, as opposed to having distinct meals, you'll probably lose most of the thermic effect of protein.
Right. And actually, exactly what you're talking about. You were talking about the thermic effect of food, which makes a lot of sense. So a calorie, I'm just going to kind of summarize this for everyone. A calorie as a unit of measure is all the same. A calorie is a calorie is a calorie. The impact that a calorie has on your body, depending on the source, is metabolically different. Now, I got that straight.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So, previously in a different podcast, you and I've talked about the food label. So the food label says calories are all alike. So whether it was 10 calories from protein or 10 calories from fat or carbohydrate, they're all the same. Right. But that's not true metabolically.
Not true metabolically. Now, what is the difference between a calorie versus a kcal?
1,000.
I mean, people ask me this question all the time.
Yeah. So a kilocalorie, when we're actually talking about calories on a food label, or we're talking about them in a human diet, technically it should be written with a capital C, and that relates to kilocalories. So a true calorie is actually 1/1000th of what you see on a food label.
Right. So that's kind of confusing for people.
Yeah, it's what we're really looking at are kilocalories always. And it's, I don't really know the origins of all of
Yeah,
that
and listen,
as to why people do it that way. But anyway, technically, when we talk about calories, we should be doing it with a capital C, because that reflects that it's supposed to be 1,000 calories or a kilocalorie.
so the next topic is, where are calories from? And
So,
yeah,
yeah.
you
So
go.
protein, carbohydrate, fat all have calories, and they are basically determined in what's called a bomb calorimeter. And from that, we've developed what were called Atwater numbers. And so protein and carbohydrate are considered to have 4 kilocalories, 4 calories per gram, where fat has 9. And those are sort of rounded up. So even based on that, protein's actually 3.65, and carbohydrates are 4.2, and fat anyway. So they're kind of rounding numbers, but
Yeah.
those are the numbers that are always used.
And I think that that's important. I think that that's where people kind of argue, saying that all calories are different. We're really talking about two different things. There's the unit of measure, and then there's the effect in the body. So they're two kind of separate different things. And that's really, and what about fiber?
Yeah, so in general, over the years, we've considered fiber as not digestible. And so people would say, well, it's part of the carbohydrate, but we can subtract it off because they aren't really calories. But now we're getting a whole new, studying the microbiome.
Yeah.
We probably upwards, depending on the type of fiber, maybe digest 50% of those as calories, and we absorb them as short chain fatty acids. So I think the whole fiber issue on the label is going to end up ultimately having to get reevaluated, because they're not energy free.
Isn't that interesting? And that's just another example of what we have believed in the past that has been repeated over and over again about net calories or net carbohydrates, when in essence, if the majority of it is absorbed, or at least 50%, then perhaps we should stop looking at net carbohydrates. And I actually never look at net carbohydrates. The patients in my practice, we never look at net carbohydrates. We look at total carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And I think that that's important.
I mean, I've used that concept of net carbohydrates before, but now that I've done some microbiome work with colleagues, I definitely have a different feeling about it. And what's the balance between soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, and how much of it's digested?
Yeah.
That's really vague at this point. And the whole arena of prebiotics,
Yeah.
we're going to have to rethink this whole issue of total carbs.
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. The next question or topic of discussion, I would say, is very common. And this is, how many calories should I be eating? And you and I have talked about this, and your research, it's really interesting. In your research, when you did weight loss studies, you gave individuals a target weight loss calories. And for women, I believe it was between 12 and 1,500. Is that correct?
Yeah, a little toward the higher part. It was more like 15 to 1,600
Okay, for
that
weight
we
loss for
started with.
women. Okay.
So these were overweight women. Okay, so we estimated that they were probably having a normal intake something in the 2000s, 2000, 2,200, 2,300. So we were trying to create at least a 500 calorie deficit. So we started out with around 1,600 calorie target.
Okay. And then the men were 1,800?
Yeah, something like that, a little bit higher. So I think that was right, 18 or 1,900.
The question someone is going to ask me is, and has asked me and you, is how many calories should I be eating? And the answer to that is, it depends on what your goals are.
Yeah.
I believe, and there's lots of different equations to calculate the number of calories that you should be eating. I found something very helpful in clinical practice is by having someone track their calories for 2 weeks, we can get a sense of where they are at baseline, because metabolic efficiency changes. The more calories you eat, the body adjusts, the more calories you burn. Your body becomes more efficient,
Yeah.
right? And rather than saying to someone who maybe, let's say someone is eating, I don't know, 3,000 calories, and then we automatically put them, and we don't have a sense of that, and we automatically put them on a, I don't know, 1,200 calorie diet because that's what they should be eating. That might not be the best approach.
Yeah.
Or let's say an individual happens to not burn a lot for whatever reason. Maybe they have hypothyroidism, and maybe their calorie expenditure all in is 1,200 calories, but we put them on a weight loss plan of 1,600 calories. They're not going to lose weight.
Yeah. I think it's a real black box. I have this discussion a lot with people about, we say calories count, and everybody has to, what's the calorie balance, but it's not a mathematically easy number because everybody's efficiency is different. And so one person might lose a lot of weight at 1,600, where the next person might not lose anything at 1,200. And so that's real confusing. So there's a lot of ways people have approached it. They use things like the Harris-Benedict equation to make an estimate of calories. I have never found that very useful. So we took the approach of basically saying, we're going to start everyone out at 1,600 calories. And if by the end of the first week, you haven't lost at least 2 to 3 pounds,
right,
you've got to reduce your calories. We're too high for you. Where some people might lose at 1,600, might lose 4 or 5 pounds, where other people might actually gain weight.
right.
So we found that it was better just to adjust on the fly.
Yeah.
So basically, this is what we're going to start with. We're going to teach you about portion size, so you have some, and I don't believe in counting calories. I think reading labels and counting calories is a nightmare for almost anybody who doesn't have a CPA. And so I would rather people learn to look at their plate and think about portion size, and then adjust
and wait,
it.
and I have to stop you. I have to stop you. What he's not saying is that calories don't matter. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that it's cumbersome for individuals to do that. And instead of being trained to say, look at the number, you could be trained to look at the portion and really learning what those portions are to leverage that visually to make
and
it.
the other reason behind that is we have to come with grips with the fact that the average American eats close to 50% of their calories outside of the home at a restaurant.
That's
and
tough.
so your ability to count calories in those situations can be really difficult.
Right.
But if you recognize portion size, you can then come to grips with it. How much protein do I need, and what does that look like? And then I can partition my carbohydrates against that. And so that's how we taught it. Some people can do calorie counting, but I think the track record is the vast majority of people either can't do it or get totally exhausted by it within the first week.
Well, and also there are apps, like I use Cronometer in my practice. I'll put a link down here below for Cronometer. And that actually tracks everything. It tracks macronutrients, and it also tracks micronutrients, which that's amazing. Tracks vitamin D, vitamin C. It just all iron, tracks other things.
I think we're gonna have more and more good apps. But again, people eat food on the fly. They eat it away from the home. They eat it in different situations. They eat it in the office. How well are you going to track it? And if you only end up tracking 90% of your calories, then you lost the battle.
Right. And, it is interesting, no pun intended, it is an uphill battle because we are in a highly palatable environment. Things are readily available. We don't have to go far. We can go to a vending machine. We can get in the car, drive. It's not that we are in a food scarcity mode, which actually is incredibly detrimental.
Yeah. I think the whole issue of obesity and how to manage it, how much of it's metabolic, how much of it's behavioral, how much of it's brain motivated. I think that we have to deal with the personal responsibility aspect of it. And I think the two things that stood out from all of the weight loss studies we did was that, there's the average person, there's the person who's extremely overweight and they were probably obese when they were a teenager. Okay, that's probably a metabolic issue that needs to be treated a different way. And then there's the people who, after the age of 25, have just slowly begun to put on a few pounds each year and now are quite overweight. To me, that's a behavioral issue. And what we found is that most people's behavioral issues are that they'll be pretty good 5 days a week, and then on the weekends they splurge, or that they eat snacks at lunch or at night or whatever. It's things they eat outside of the meals. Their basic meals are pretty good, but then they snack. And to me, the uneven day-to-day pattern that Americans have and the snacking patterns, to me, are the people who sort of struggle with a slow gain over age. I think those are the issues.
So I want to stop you here. I think this is very important. When you say those that have, I don't know if you use the word erratic eating patterns or uneven eating patterns, are you defining this by the amount per meal, or you're saying at one time a person is eating at 10 a.m. and then the next day they're eating at 3 p.m. and then the next day they're eating at 7 a.m.? Is that what you mean by erratic?
Yeah. So I think that issue in weight loss is very important. If you're trying to restrict calories, I think consistent timing is very important, or to avoid hunger. I think your body is trying to get used to a calorie level. And I think that if you one day have breakfast and the next day you skip it, or you have a lunch and the next day you skip it, or one day it's at 11 o'clock and the next day it's at 3. I think your body is trying to decide how to manage its calories, how much is coming out of storage and when. And if you're trying to get along at 1,200 calories, you need to have it spaced very carefully. So I think timing is quite important.
That's interesting.
I'm sorry.
Basically, the take-home message is that, number one, if someone were to ask you how many calories you should be eating, the first thing an individual would say is, well, there's two major ways to approach that. Number one, it's to look at an equation, and there's multiple equations, like the Harris-Benedict equation. The second way in which you could do that is, yes, could you calculate your basal metabolic rate? They've got machines that do that, and then add or subtract based on activity. Mostly add, yes. And then the third most effective way I have found in clinical practice, and I think that you have found, is actually seeing what an individual is doing over a 2-week period of time, getting a baseline assessment, and then adjusting for calories as is. They should be losing weight, depending on where you are in your weight loss journey or health journey. Or what your goals are. If your goals are to put on muscle requires calories, right? It does require a certain amount of substrate. You're not going to, can you lose weight and put on muscle? Well, you can, but you also need to have enough calories that will be able to support protein turnover. Like I'll see the SEALs, they lose weight and put on muscle. They're also training at an exponential rate. So while these things are possible, it's not always common. What I see is that most people who are building muscle, I mean, and maybe this is a topic that we should bring Alan on with, Alan Argon, he's amazing, bring him in. I see most people that are putting on muscle, they do put on a little bit of fat.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to do it, to put on muscle, if you're not in a positive calorie balance. So, to lose fat and gain muscle at the same time, if you're a 26-year-old Navy SEAL, maybe, but the average 56-year-old guy can't pull that off.
Right.
So, as you get older and hormones aren't necessarily your, top of your list anymore.
It should be.
They should be, but, there's an aging effect on testosterone. So, but anyway, I think in general, your point's exactly right, that if you're truly looking to gain muscle mass, most people are going to have to be in a calorie positive balance.
Right. And all that to be said for what is your goal? And if your goal is weight loss, then you really need to think about how many calories you're eating, improve the efficiency, right? How are you going to improve the efficiency of what you're utilizing? Or if you are trying to build muscle, that's another way in which you would increase calories, right? So it still is that calories in, calories out.
The other comment that you made a couple of minutes ago about sort of assessing the diet over a couple of weeks, I think we're getting into a better understanding about personalized nutrition and that people aren't all alike. And by taking that sort of approach, you can begin to realize what people will do, what they want to eat. And I think within certain limits, we can work with what kinds of food they want to eat. I mean, if I'm working with a vegetarian, obviously having a super high protein diet is not going to work out very well.
Right.
If I'm working with somebody who likes a lot of animal-based foods, making them vegetarians not going to work out very well.
Right.
You know, if I have somebody who wants lots of Italian kinds of foods, making them ketos probably not going to work out.
Right.
You know, so at some level, we're going to have to personalize it and figure out how to balance the calories within the lifestyle they're willing to have.
Yeah, because that makes something, what was it? Maintainable, predictable. You said something.
That's why, you know, you and I tend not to use the word diet very often. I don't think any diet should ever be followed, frankly. I think we should have a lifestyle.
Except for mine. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, I think that we should have lifestyle approaches. And so if you start down the road of a new diet, if you don't consider that something you can be doing that exact thing for 2 years from now, you probably shouldn't do it, because you're just going to lose the weight and gain it back. And when you gain it back, you'll have more fat and less lean tissue than when you started.
Terrible, terrible. So don't do that. Anyway, guys, so basically the take home message for how many calories should I be eating? Number one, depends on your goal. Are you trying to lose weight? Are you trying to maintain weight, or are you trying to build muscle? Did I miss anything else? I think that that's pretty much the three main reasons, things someone would be looking to track calories. The way in which you can do this is, number one, to determine your baseline. I think that that is the most effective and easy way. And then making adjustments after that would be if you need to increase or decrease calories depending on your goal, or right. So whether it's weight loss, hypertrophy, or maintenance. And then the next step that I would say in terms of determining how many calories you should eat, you know, as you train, I say this cautiously, and this is probably a topic for another time. Should you add in more calories? And the answer is no, depending. Your body becomes more efficient at utilizing those calories.
Yeah.
So, and again, that's a topic that's a little bit more complex. There's a bit more to talk about on that, but the body really does a phenomenal job at efficiency.
Yeah. As you were talking, a question I get asked quite a lot is that if I take a protein shake, can that make me gain weight? And I think what people need to understand is that if you just add 200 calorie protein shake on top of what you're already doing, there's a good chance it'll make you gain weight. So when we use protein shakes in weight loss, we use them to substitute for other calories.
Right.
And typically carbohydrate in my case, you know, in the way we approach it, but it could be fat. But basically, you know, you can't add something in on top of what may already be bad habits and expect that to correct your bad habits.
Yeah. I mean, all this is really important. And you guys, obviously we could go on forever, which we won't. We'll spare you. Try to keep these videos short. Anyway, if you liked this video, please like, subscribe, share it. We are really trying to spread the message of a muscle-centric approach to health, because we know that the fat-phobic, fat-focused paradigm has failed. So together, collectively, we actually can pave the way forward and re-educate society. So I'm out.